5 years had passed since the banishment, and Kyle Bennett stood on the bridge of the colony ship watching the stars streak past in ways that should have been impossible. He was 42 years old, a former naval officer who had spent the last decade planning for this exact moment. Behind his ship flew 20 others, each carrying 10,000 colonists and enough equipment to build entire cities. They were heading into the unknown, into space that the Council had marked as worthless on their charts. Kyle knew better. The Council was old and lazy. They looked at a system and saw only immediate value. Humans looked at potential. The navigation officer called out their position. They were now beyond the furthest Council monitoring station. Officially, this region of space was unmapped. Unofficially, human scout ships had been exploring it for 3 years. Kyle pulled up the data on his command screen. 17 star systems with potentially habitable planets. Asteroid fields rich in rare minerals. Gas giants perfect for fuel harvesting. All of it waiting for someone bold enough to claim it. Linda Shaw was down in engineering, watching her displays with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. The engines her team had built were humanity's greatest secret. They had taken the basic Council technology and stripped it down to understand every component. Then they had rebuilt it using human materials and human methods. The result was something that should not have worked according to Council physics. It worked anyway. Linda smiled every time she thought about how the Council's greatest scientists would react if they knew. Humans had taken 30 years of borrowed technology and already surpassed it. The engines hummed with a sound that Linda had come to love, smooth and steady and powerful. They were making a journey that would have taken a Council ship 14 months. They would arrive in just under 9 weeks. Speed was everything now. The faster humanity could expand, the harder they would be to stop. The first planet came into view on schedule. Kyle watched it grow from a point of light to a full sphere on the display. Brown and green continents, blue oceans, white clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns. The scout reports had called it Liberty, and the name fit. This would be where humanity made its stand, where they proved that being banished was the best thing that ever happened to them. Paul Martinez was already on the surface by the time the main fleet arrived. He had come 6 months earlier with an advance team of 500. Governor Martinez, they called him now, though he still thought of himself as just an engineer who was good at organizing people. He stood at the edge of the construction site and watched the landing ships descend through the atmosphere. Each one carried prefabricated sections of buildings, vehicles, power generators, and everything else needed to establish a permanent settlement. The planet had weather that made Earth look calm. Storms that could tear apart anything on the surface, so Paul had made the decision to build underground. The cities would be carved into the rock, safe from the wind and rain. The entrances would be small and easily defended. If the Council ever came looking, they would find it almost impossible to dig humanity out. Within 3 months, the population of Liberty reached 50,000. Within a year, it was 200,000. Families moved into apartments cut from stone. Children attended schools in chambers lit by artificial sunlight. Farms were established in vast underground spaces where crops grew in soil shipped from Earth and supplemented with local minerals. The air was recycled and cleaned. The water was filtered and pure. It was not paradise, but it was home. Paul walked through the main plaza during what passed for evening underground. The artificial sky above showed stars and a moon that did not really exist. People sat at outdoor cafes drinking coffee and talking about their days. A group of teenagers played soccer in a park where grass had been carefully cultivated. Music drifted from a bar where someone was playing guitar. This was what they had built. A piece of humanity transplanted to alien soil and thriving. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, Christina Bell was overseeing construction that would have terrified the Council if they had known about it. Admiral Bell now, promoted after she volunteered to command humanity's hidden military expansion. The shipyards were scattered throughout the asteroid belt and beyond Neptune's orbit, far from any sensors that might be watching Earth. Each yard was building vessels that incorporated every lesson humanity had learned from its short and violent history. Christina floated in zero gravity outside, Shipyard 7, watching the skeleton of a cruiser take shape. Robots welded hull plates while human workers in spacesuits directed the operations. This ship would be fast, heavily armed, and tough enough to take punishment that would cripple a Council vessel. More importantly, it would be crewed by people who understood that war was not a game or a diplomatic tool. It was survival. The fleet grew slowly but steadily. Destroyers and frigates and carriers, each one tested in secret exercises in the outer system. Christina ran her crews hard, drilling them on tactics that no Council species used anymore. Flanking maneuvers, coordinated strikes, hit-and-run attacks. The Council fought wars the way they did everything else, with established rules and predictable patterns. Christina planned to throw out the rulebook entirely. She received regular reports from the colonies. Liberty was producing its own ships now, smaller craft designed for system defense. 2 more colonies had been established in nearby systems. The population outside Sol had reached 800,000 and was growing fast. Young people especially were volunteering to leave Earth behind. They saw the colonies as adventure and opportunity. Christina saw them as insurance. If something happened to Earth, humanity would survive. Daniel Kim made his breakthrough in a laboratory on Titan. He was studying the samples that scout ships had collected from the void between galactic arms. Empty space was never truly empty. It was filled with exotic matter and energy that most species ignored because it seemed useless. Daniel saw something different. He saw the key to rewriting the rules of faster-than-light travel. The equations took months to work out. Testing took another 6 months. The first successful jump happened on a cold morning when Daniel was running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. A probe entered the jump field and vanished. 3 seconds later it reappeared exactly where the math said it should, 15 light-years away. Daniel stared at the data for a full minute before letting himself believe it. He had just made every ship in the galaxy obsolete. The prototype drive was installed on a small courier ship within weeks. Captain Rachel Hayes took it on its maiden voyage with a hand-picked crew of 12. They jumped from Saturn to a point 100 light-years away. The journey took 6 days. A Council ship would have needed 3 months. Rachel sent back a simple message: it works. Build more. President Coleman received the news in his private office. He was in his 2nd term now and looking forward to retirement. But this changed everything. He called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. Plans that had been theoretical suddenly became possible. Expansion that was supposed to take decades could happen in years. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift, and the Council did not even know it yet. Coleman looked at the star charts on his wall. Red markers showed Council territory. Blue showed human colonies. There was so much empty space between them, so much room to grow. He thought about the Council's arrogance 5 years ago, how certain they had been that humanity would fade into obscurity. They had no idea what was coming. The nebula was beautiful in a way that made Susan Blake catch her breath every time she looked at it. Clouds of gas glowed purple and blue and green, lit from within by newborn stars. Her ship, the Pathfinder, had been exploring this region for 2 months now, and they had found exactly nothing. No planets worth settling, no resources worth mining, just endless clouds of stellar dust that played havoc with their sensors. She was about to recommend they move on when the communications officer called out a contact. The ship appeared on their screens slowly, emerging from the nebula like a ghost. It was smaller than Pathfinder and shaped like a teardrop. The hull was covered in panels that seemed to shift color to match the nebula around it. Susan had never seen a design like it. More importantly, it was not in any of the databases that humanity had stolen from the Council. This was a species that the galaxy's great civilizations knew nothing about. Greg Palmer stood beside her chair, his hand resting on the communications console. He was young for a first officer, only 31, but he had a gift for languages that had proven useful more than once. Susan nodded to him and he opened a channel. The first attempt was basic math. Prime numbers, simple sequences, universal concepts that any spacefaring species should recognize. For a long moment there was nothing. Then the alien ship responded with its own mathematical sequence. Contact took 3 days to establish. The aliens called themselves the Harvan, and they were cautious in a way that suggested bad experiences with strangers. Their language was clicking and whistly, sounds that human vocal cords could not reproduce. But the translation software eventually worked out the basics. The Harvan wanted to know who humans were and why they were in the nebula. Susan decided honesty was the best approach. She told them about Earth and the Council and the Banishment. She told them about the colonies humanity was building in the dark spaces between Council territory. The Harvan leader, whose name translated roughly as Keeper of Stories, listened to everything. Then he told Susan about his own people. The Harvan had lived in the nebula for thousands of years. The dense gas clouds hid them from sensors and protected them from enemies. But that protection was not perfect. Raiders came through regularly, taking Harvan from their mining colonies and selling them as slaves. The species who did this were called the Kryn, and they operated in the lawless regions beyond Council space. The Council knew about them but did nothing because the Kryn never touched Council worlds. Susan felt anger building in her chest as the Keeper spoke. She had seen enough of the galaxy to know that the Council's justice only extended to its members. Everyone else could burn and they would not lift a finger. She made a decision that she knew might get her court-martialed. She offered to help. The Pathfinder was an exploration vessel, but it carried weapons for self-defense. More importantly, it carried a crew who had trained for combat because humanity never forgot that the universe was dangerous. The Keeper was suspicious at first. In his experience, aliens did not offer help without demanding something in return. Susan understood that. She told him the truth. Humanity needed allies and friends. They needed to show the galaxy that there was an alternative to the Council's cold indifference. If helping the Harvan accomplished that, then it was worth doing. The Keeper considered this for a long time. Finally, he agreed to show them where the Kryn would strike next. The Harvan mining colony was on a small moon at the edge of the nebula. 2,000 people lived there, extracting rare metals from the rocky surface. Intelligence said the Kryn would raid it within a week. Susan positioned the Pathfinder in a nearby asteroid field and waited. Her crew was tense. This would be the first time humans fought another species since the Banishment. Some of them wondered if they were making a mistake. Others just checked their weapons and prepared to do what needed to be done. The Kryn arrived exactly when the Harvan predicted. 3 ships, larger than Pathfinder but older and poorly maintained. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced real resistance. Susan watched them descend toward the moon and begin their attack. Kryn soldiers in armored suits dropped from their ships and started rounding up Harvan workers. The aliens were efficient and brutal. They had done this many times before. Susan gave the order to attack. Pathfinder burst from the asteroid field at full speed. The Kryn did not see them until it was too late. Human weapons had been designed to fight Council ships, which meant they were devastating against anything less advanced. The first Kryn vessel took a missile strike to its engines and went spinning out of control. The second tried to run, but Pathfinder was faster. The third actually attempted to fight back, but its weapons could not penetrate human shields. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 2 Kryn ships were disabled and drifting. The third had managed to escape into the nebula. On the moon's surface, the Kryn soldiers surrendered when they realized their rides home were not coming. The Harvan workers were safe. Not a single one had been taken. The Keeper came aboard Pathfinder after the battle. He walked through the corridors with wide eyes, looking at everything. Human ships were different from what he was used to. More compact, more efficient, built for crews who did not have hundreds of years to learn their systems. He met with Susan in her ready room and they talked for hours. He wanted to know everything about humanity, where they came from, how they thought, why they had helped when they gained nothing from it. Susan tried to explain that humanity remembered being weak. They remembered when other nations or groups had helped them or when they had failed to help each other. Those memories shaped how they saw the universe. The strong had a responsibility to protect the weak, not because of profit or politics, but because it was right. The Keeper left Pathfinder with a promise. He would spread word of what humanity had done. There were dozens of species in this region of space, all living in the shadows and surviving however they could. They needed to know that someone cared, that someone was willing to fight for them. News traveled fast through the underground networks that connected the independent species. Within months, human ships started receiving messages from aliens asking for help or offering trade. Some wanted protection from raiders. Others wanted technology or medicine. A few just wanted to talk and learn about these strange newcomers who did not follow the Council's rules. Patricia Cole found herself suddenly very busy. She had been appointed as humanity's ambassador to independent species, a position that had not existed a year ago. Now she was receiving requests for meetings faster than she could schedule them. Aliens came to Liberty and to the other human colonies. They brought gifts and stories and sometimes warnings about dangers in certain sectors. Patricia set up a conference on Liberty that brought together representatives from 15 different species. Some were familiar with each other. Most had never met. All of them had one thing in common. They lived outside the Council's protection, and they were tired of being ignored or exploited. Patricia stood before them and proposed something radical. An alliance. Not like the Council with its hierarchy and rules. Something new. A commonwealth where every species had an equal voice and every member looked out for the others. The debate went on for days. Some species were suspicious of human intentions. Others worried about making themselves targets for the Council's anger. But slowly a consensus formed. The galaxy needed an alternative. It needed a place where being small or weak or different did not mean being abandoned. They drafted a charter that emphasized mutual defense, free trade, and respect for each species' sovereignty. 15 species signed it. They called themselves the Terran Commonwealth. Named after the Latin word for Earth, President Coleman received the news and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Not just for humanity, but for everyone who had been cast aside by the old powers. The Commonwealth was still small and weak compared to the Council, but it was growing. And more importantly, it was proving that there was another way to organize civilization, one based on cooperation instead of domination. The Council's intelligence chamber was deep beneath the surface of their capital world. Protected by layers of security that had kept secrets safe for millennia, Vrak stood before the holographic display with his compound eyes taking in every detail of the data. He was the head of Council intelligence, an insectoid creature whose species had mastered the art of information gathering long before humans discovered fire. What he was seeing now made his antennae twitch with concern. The display showed star charts of the galactic south. Red markers indicated Council territory, yellow showed neutral space, and blue, spreading like a virus across the map, showed the Terran Commonwealth. 12 years ago there had been nothing. Now there were 40 human colonies and 20 allied species. The blue was growing faster than anything Vrax had seen in his 80 years of service. He compiled his report with the thoroughness that his species was known for. Population estimates, military capability assessments, economic projections. Every piece of data pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity had not simply survived their banishment. They had thrived. In the time it took most Council species to establish a single colony, humans had built an empire. Supreme Chancellor Vexnar read the report in his private chambers. His clawed hands gripped the datapad hard enough to crack the screen. He had expected humanity to fade away, to become a minor species confined to their home system. Instead, they had become a threat. A real threat. He called an emergency session of the Council for the following day. The debate in the Council chamber was heated. Some species argued that humanity should be left alone, as long as they stayed in their own territory. Others demanded immediate action. The Zorlathi military commander pointed out that every month they waited, the Commonwealth grew stronger. Better to strike now while they still had an advantage. Vexnar listened to all of it and then made his decision. He sent a message to Richard Hayes demanding that humanity surrender immediately and dissolve the Commonwealth. All human military forces were to disarm. All colonies were to accept Council oversight. These were not negotiations. These were orders. Richard received the message at his office on Liberty. He was older now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were still sharp. He read Vexnar's demands twice and then laughed. It was a bitter sound with no humor in it. The Council still believed they could dictate terms to humanity. They had learned nothing. Richard composed his response. He, in simple words that could not be misunderstood. The answer was no. Humanity owed the Council nothing. The Commonwealth would continue to grow, and any attempt to stop it would be met with force. The message sent shockwaves through the Council. No one had defied them so directly in living memory. The younger species watched nervously to see what would happen. The older species prepared for war. Border patrols were reinforced. Fleets were mobilized. The Council was going to remind humanity of its place. The first skirmish happened at the edge of neutral space. A Council patrol of 6 ships encountered a single Commonwealth vessel, guarding a trade route. The patrol commander ordered the human ship to withdraw. Captain Derek Wells responded by powering up his weapons. The Council commander was insulted. 1 small ship against 6. It was laughable. He gave the order to attack. The battle was short and brutal. The human ship, TCS Valiant, moved with a speed that caught the Council vessels off guard. Its weapons hit with precision that disabled 2 ships in the first volley. The Council patrol tried to surround it, but Valiant was already gone, repositioning faster than their sensors could track. When the engagement ended 3 minutes later, 2 Council ships were destroyed and 4 were fleeing with damaged engines. Valiant had taken minor hull damage and no casualties. Reports of the battle reached both capitals within hours. The Council was shocked. Their ships were supposed to be superior. Their technology was supposed to be unmatched. Yet a single human vessel had demolished an entire patrol. Vexnar realized that the intelligence reports had understated the problem. Humanity had not just caught up to Council technology. They had surpassed it. Deep in Commonwealth space, other changes were happening. The Peltherin had been Council members for 300 years. They were a peaceful species who had built their civilization on trade and diplomacy. But they were tired. Tired of paying tribute for protection that never came. Tired of being ignored when they brought concerns to the Council. Tired of watching the Council grow more corrupt and arrogant with each passing decade. Carla Hughes met with the Peltherin ambassador in secret. She was young for a diplomat, only 28, but she had a talent for understanding what people needed to hear. The ambassador was old and worried. His people wanted to leave the Council, but they feared retaliation. Carla listened carefully and then made her pitch. The Commonwealth would protect them. More than that, the Commonwealth would welcome them as equals. There would be no tribute, no hierarchy, just mutual cooperation and respect. The ambassador took the offer back to his home world. The debate in the Peltherin Parliament lasted for weeks. Finally, they voted. By a narrow margin, they chose to leave the Council and join the Commonwealth. It was the first time a Council member had defected, and it sent panic through the capital. If the Peltherin could leave, others might follow. They were right to panic. Within a month, the Yestrin announced they were leaving. Then the Morvani. Then 3 others. Species who had been Council members for centuries were walking away. The structure that had held the galaxy together for thousands of years was cracking. Christina Bell watched the political situation from her command center on Liberty. She was an admiral now with 4 stars in command of the entire Commonwealth fleet. The defections were good news, but they also made war inevitable. The Council could not allow this trend to continue. They would have to make an example of someone. Her intelligence officers confirmed what she already suspected. The Council was assembling a massive fleet. Target unknown, but the smart money said it would be Commonwealth shipyards at Kilo Station. She began moving her forces into position. The Second Fleet had just finished its shakedown cruise and was ready for combat. Third Fleet was older but still deadly. Fourth Fleet was built around carriers and their fighter wings. Fifth Fleet specialized in hit-and-run tactics. Together they represented everything humanity had learned about warfare in its bloody history. Christina positioned them along the most likely approach routes to Kalos and waited. The junior officers were nervous. Many of them had never seen real combat. But the veterans, the ones who remembered the banishment and the long years of preparation, were calm. They had trained for this. They had built these ships and practiced these tactics and studied the enemy. When the Council came, they would be ready. In the Council capital, Vexnar stood before the assembled fleet commanders. 800 ships filled the orbital space above the planet, the largest military force the Council had assembled in 2 centuries. The plan was simple. Jump to Kalos Station, destroy the shipyards, crush any resistance, show the galaxy that defying the Council meant destruction. The commanders saluted and returned to their ships. Within hours, the entire fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel. Christina received confirmation of the fleet's departure from her scouts. She activated the fleet-wide channel and addressed every ship under her command. She told them that what they did in the coming battle would determine the future of the galaxy. If they won, the Commonwealth would survive and grow. If they lost, humanity and all their allies would be crushed. There was no middle ground, no room for doubt. They would fight with everything they had, and they would win because failure was not an option. The crews responded with a roar that echoed through every ship. They were ready. The Council was about to learn that humanity had not spent 12 years building an empire, just to surrender it without a fight. The Battle of Kalos Station would be remembered for generations. One way or another, the galaxy was about to change. The Council fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and filled the space around Kilo Station like a swarm of locusts. 800 ships of various sizes and designs, each one representing centuries of technological refinement. The commanders expected to find the Commonwealth unprepared. Instead, they found Christina Bell's entire armada waiting in perfect formation. The element of surprise that the Council had counted on was gone. Admiral Bell stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the enemy fleet materialize on her screens. She had fought in simulations 1,000 times, but this was different. Real ships with real crews who would die if she made mistakes. She pushed the fear down deep and focused on the tactical display. The Council had numbers, but they were arranged in the traditional formation that had not changed in 500 years, predictable, rigid, exactly what she had planned for. She gave her first orders calmly. Third Fleet would hit the Council's left flank. Fifth Fleet would harass their right. Second Fleet, the newest and most powerful, would drive straight through their center. The key was speed and coordination. Keep the enemy off balance. Never let them settle into their comfortable patterns. She watched her forces begin to move and felt a moment of pride. These crews had trained together for years. They knew their jobs. Nathan Foster led the fighter wing from the carrier Liberty's Hope. He was 26 years old and had never seen combat outside of training exercises. Around him flew 200 other fighters, small craft designed for speed and maneuverability. Their job was to punch holes in the Council's carrier groups and take out their command ships. Nathan checked his weapons one last time and pushed his fighter to full speed. Behind him, his squadron followed in perfect formation. The Council forces opened fire first. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the two fleets. Commonwealth ships scattered and regrouped, their new engines allowing movements that seemed impossible. Council ships tried to track targets, but the humans were already somewhere else. First blood went to the Commonwealth when a destroyer caught a Council cruiser with a full broadside. The cruiser's shields collapsed and its hull broke apart in a flash of atmosphere and debris. Amy Richardson sat in the tactical center aboard Bell's flagship, surrounded by screens showing every angle of the battle. She was a civilian analyst, not military, but her ability to see patterns in chaos had made her invaluable. She watched the Council fleet's movements and spotted their weakness. Their formations were designed for maximum firepower, but it made them slow to respond to threats from unexpected angles. She fed this information to the fleet commanders and they adjusted their attacks accordingly. The battle raged for 6 hours, and it was nothing like the clean simulations. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Debris fields created hazards for both sides. Communications were jammed and cleared and jammed again. Nathan lost 3 members of his squadron in the first hour when they flew into a crossfire. He wanted to stop and mourn, but there was no time. He led the survivors deeper into the Council formation, hunting for the command carriers. Christina watched the tactical display and made decisions that would haunt her dreams for years. She ordered ships to hold positions that resulted in heavy damage. She sent squadrons into fights where some would not return. Every choice meant lives lost, but retreating meant losing everything. The Council had more ships, but they were fighting the wrong battle. They expected the Commonwealth to break and run. Instead, humanity was attacking with a ferocity that shocked them. The turning point came when Nathan's wing found the Council command carrier. It was a massive vessel, 3 times the size of any Commonwealth ship, and it coordinated the entire fleet's movements. Nathan armed his heaviest missiles and dove toward it. Point defense fire lit up around him like deadly fireworks. 2 more fighters from his squadron were destroyed. He did not look back. He fired every missile he had at the carrier's bridge section and pulled up so hard the acceleration almost made him black out. The missiles hit and the carrier's command structure exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations. For critical minutes, the Council fleet lost coordination. Ships stopped receiving orders. Formation discipline broke down. Christina saw the opening and ordered a full assault. Second Fleet drove into the gap with every weapon firing. Council ships that had been advancing suddenly found themselves surrounded and cut off from support. The Council commanders realized they were losing. Some tried to rally their forces. Others began retreating toward the jump points. The fleet that had arrived with such confidence was now scattered and desperate. Bell gave the order to pursue, but not too aggressively. She wanted the Council to retreat. She wanted them to go home and tell everyone what had happened here. Fear would be more useful than a few more destroyed ships. When the battle ended, the space around Kilo Station was filled with debris and rescue pods. The Council had lost nearly 400 ships. The Commonwealth had lost 90. It was a devastating defeat for the Council, and a victory that proved the Commonwealth could defend itself. Nathan landed his damaged fighter on the carrier and sat in the cockpit for 10 minutes shaking. He had survived, barely. Many others had not. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had been considering joining the Commonwealth now rushed to sign the charter. Species that had remained loyal to the Council began questioning whether that loyalty was worth maintaining. The old order was collapsing and everyone could see it. Vexnar sat alone in his chambers and stared at the casualty reports. 400 ships, tens of thousands dead, all for nothing. The Commonwealth still stood. Worse, the Council now looked weak. He knew that more species would leave. The empire he had spent his life serving was dying. Part of him wanted to order another attack, to throw everything they had at the humans and their allies. But he was old enough to recognize when a war was already lost. He sent a message to President Coleman requesting negotiations. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Admitting defeat to the species he had banished 12 years ago felt like swallowing poison. But the alternative was watching the Council tear itself apart in a war it could not win. Jack Coleman received the message in his final year as president. He was 70 now and tired down to his bones. The war had aged him more than the years. He agreed to meet with Vexnar on neutral ground. The location chosen was Vander, a frozen moon that belonged to neither side. Security for both leaders was heavy. Trust was non-existent, but they sat down across from each other and began to talk. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Both sides had demands. Both sides had to compromise. The final treaty established clear boundaries. The Council would keep the core worlds and the ancient territories. The Commonwealth would have the outer regions and any species that chose to join them. Most importantly, they agreed to a technology exchange program for non-military advances. Humanity would share its medical discoveries. The Council would share its agricultural techniques. Both sides would benefit from cooperation instead of conflict. 10 years after the treaty, Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the TCS Endeavour and prepared for humanity's most ambitious mission yet. Her ship was built for deep space exploration beyond anything attempted before. The mission was to travel past the galactic rim and see what lay in the void between galaxies. She had a crew of 500, enough supplies for 10 years and engines that could take them farther than any ship had ever gone. The Commonwealth had grown beyond anyone's predictions. Over 100 species were now members. They controlled a third of known space. More importantly, they had proven that cooperation worked better than domination. Young species looked to the Commonwealth as a model. Even some Council species quietly adopted Commonwealth principles while maintaining their official membership. Richard Hayes taught history at Liberty University to students both human and alien. He was retired from politics but still sharp. His lectures covered the banishment and everything that followed. He never spoke with bitterness. Instead, he talked about opportunity. The Council had meant to destroy humanity's future. Instead, they had freed humanity to create something better. His students listened with fascination. Many of them had not been born when the banishment happened. To them, the Commonwealth was just how things had always been. Richard made sure they understood the cost. The people who had been forced from their homes. The soldiers who had died at Kelos. The years of fear and uncertainty. The Commonwealth had not been built easily. It had been built by people who refused to give up. In the old council chambers, now half empty, Vexnar looked at the star charts one final time before his retirement. The blue markers showing Commonwealth space had grown so large that they dominated the display. He thought about his decision 12 years ago, the vote to banish humanity. At the time, it had seemed wise. Humanity was advancing too fast and disrupting the ancient balance. Better to remove them before they became a threat. He had been wrong. Not about humanity being a threat. They were more dangerous than he had imagined. But banishing them had not eliminated the threat. It had created something worse. A rival civilization built on principles that made the Council look corrupt and stagnant by comparison. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or their technology. It was their refusal to accept limitations. It was hope the galaxy would never be the same. The old empire had been replaced by something new. Something that believed all species deserved dignity and opportunity. Something that looked at the stars and saw endless potential instead of fixed boundaries. Vexnar had tried to stop humanity's rise. Instead, he had guaranteed it. That irony would be his legacy. The Chancellor who banished humanity and accidentally created an empire